For those of you who don't know me, my name is Saloni Puli, and I lead the team of programming that brings you conversations and events like this at the Quorum. On behalf of my team, the founders of the Quorum who happen to be here today, Vivek Kaul and Sonia Naman, I welcome you all to this evening. It's a special evening for me because I have known the guest of honor today since he was a very young man in St. Stephen's College, and he started getting referred to as Dr. Rathin Roy. So for me, he went from being Rathin to Dr. Rathin Roy. And the thing with the Dr. Rathin Roy is that he also calls himself a sort of a economic diplomat. That is because he has spent many years with the United UNDP, touring places like Brazil, New York, Kathmandu, Bangkok, many other countries, giving his financial advice to organizations and countries. From there, he became a professor. He has taught at SOAS University in UK. He has taught at Manchester University. He is currently also teaching at Jita University in Visakhapatnam. Actually, when he sent me his bio data, I was like, my eyes were a little bit cross-eyed, and I said, I'll just pick the top line findings, as they say. So he has been a professor. So he's been an academic. He's also been an advisor because he was on the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister. He has been a member of the 7th Pay Commission and economic advisor on the 13th Finance Commission. And here I'll pause because if I continue, then this evening will be about his achievements rather than his opinions. And I think it's important for me to say here that I see him, with my little understanding of economics, I see Dr. Rathin Roy as a bit of a contrarian because of his opinions on the Indian economy, a bit of a disruptor. And I'm not the expert on this, so I will offer no views on what he has been saying, but he's been saying some very interesting things in his articles recently. He has been meeting some very interesting people too, and I will allow him to come and tell you about it because you're here to hear him speak. And since I'm not an expert, he arranged for a expert to be here to speak to Dr. Rathin Roy. And we are joined by Vivek Kaul. Vivek Kaul is the author of a book called Bad Money, which if you haven't read, you must because it was a hot bestseller, even with a title like Bad Money. I think actually it makes a lot of sense nowadays. So, yes. He writes very regularly for the Mint. He has a regular column. He gets invited to speak at IIMs across the country. He has been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, and the BBC. So I think we've got a good combination for you this evening. And before taking up so much of your time, I would like to invite Dr. Rathin Roy and Vivek Kaul to the stage. Enjoy your evening.
So should I call you Dr. Roy? No, Dr. Roy is in the media. Dr. Roy tends to be someone who used to own the channel called TV. Nothing. I think I'll put the first question will be quintessential Mumbai question. क्या लगता है?
मुंबई में हूँ तो ये बोलूँगा. I only see upside, using my words carefully, for the equities market in India, starting now for the first month. With one difference. I have been dealing with people, both my fans in London and here, who's asking me about it. Stop linking the India story with the equity story. The India story is over. And don't make me, I wonder about this in 2019. And the reason I say this is very simple, and I'll say it to you in a very simple way. I can make some money writing a mathematical model of it, but I tell you very simple. So, you make some GDP, any amount of GDP, 6%, 7%. That GDP has to go to somebody. It can go to somebody who earns wages. It can go to somebody who is borrowing money from a bank and pays interest on it, that's returns to capital. And what is left over goes to the equity markets, if it's not going abroad. Right? I don't know how many of you work for a living. At these prices, I assume very few. But those of you who do know perfectly, and if you're a kid, you know that. The wages in this country have been stagnant for people like us. I'm not talking about poor people. For people like us, have been stagnant and falling. And even places like the IIMs are now finding it difficult to place the people at salaries at least they pay in countries. And less than 1 lakh. 1 lakh a month is where you start paying. Okay? Most of you are not hiring freshers at salaries unlike you when I was a fresher, at which you start taking income tax. It's a completely new phenomenon for you. You read the papers over the last 5 years, companies like Ambani, Adani, etc., are going debt-free and celebrating. What does that mean? If they're going debt-free, it means the demand for debt, right, and therefore the return on debt is not going to happen. You can only earn interest on capital if you lend, right? They're not lending. So, and therefore there's no pick-up in private investment. So if wages are not going to go up and profits are not going to go up, and the government is broke, and explain later, obviously equities are going to go up. So congratulations. You're going to have a lovely time over the next 5 years. But don't link it to the industry.
So, why shouldn't we link it to the industry? Now, if I'll throw some numbers at you. In 24-25, which is the last financial year, India is expected to grow at 6.5%. In 22-23, we grew at 7.7%. In 21-22, we grew at 9.7%. In 23-24, we grew at 9.2%. So, why is it that you are writing off, people like you are writing off the India growth story, and people like me are worried?
Well, first, let's not do self-congratulatory stuff. There was something called COVID. And I don't remember more, but let me tell you, suppose our growth rate up to COVID, I know what it was actually 6%, right? It was very low actually. 19, FY 19, FY 18, FY 17, FY 16. After demob, we never grew at more than 5%. Conventions. Then we had COVID, and obviously we had negative growth. So, polite economists, we have saying, we shrunk. So, COVID has shrunk the kids, right? Indian economy becomes substantially smaller. Then you start growing, obviously. You're growing from a smaller base. Right? It's like if you get 80 out of 100 in the exam, and the next year the maths ends up getting 85, that's 6% growth. But from 80, if you go to 60 and you say, Papa, this year I got 70, my growth is 15%, my father will give me a time slap saying, go eat private food. Now I can't slap my own country, so I'll tell you why. So, and to put it this way, if we had grown at the same growth rate that we were growing on average over the 10 years before COVID, then we would have only made that up. That is, we would have been in that place of the COVID hit last. So all this 7, 9, all these big numbers refer to recovery from COVID. It's called the basic economics, recovery. Now we're at 6%. And actually there's a second silver line in this. We cannot go lower than this. I promise you, we will never go below 5.5. Or on a good day, 6.5. That's going to be our zone in life. And this is great. I'm old enough to say it. Ab tum log naujawan hain yahan, sorry. So I'm old enough to remember a very boring country where we had growth rates named after certain religious, not religious, social cultural denomination. It was called the age rate of growth.
You will get it.
I'm in trouble. Is it Bombay? People have no sense of humor. I'm not going to try. At least the politician. So, movements. And that rate of growth was 3.5%. Today, I'll see we are back in a situation like that for the foreseeable future, but it's 6%. And that is a wonderful thing. Because we are not going to be Pakistan. That I can promise. We are not going to be, a lot of very bad countries, right? But we're not going to be South Africa. South Korea. We're not going to be China if we don't keep this. Because at that rate of growth, you're going to pump the law. You sort of, we are about $3,000 per capita. Now you're going to get to $6,700, $8,000 per capita. It's lucky $10,000. But just like Brazil that I've worked, just like Mexico, just like Philippines, just like Thailand, just like Egypt, you are going to have a large proportion of people suffering from the same problems that they did when the country was poorer at triple the per capita income. And once you go in there, it's like Hotel California. You can check it from middle income trap, as I call it. You can never. And that's why I'm saying the India story is over, because unless you do something really fast, and our time is running out, and there is no political incentive to do anything about it, we will be like countless other countries. We will not be like China, we will be like Brazil, we will not be like South Korea, we will be like Thailand, we will be in a middle income trap.
Thailand is a good place to go.
Yeah. Better than being 3,000. It's a good place to go. Okay. They are the biggest exporters of chickens in the world. That's great. But they're never going to be South.
Okay. So, I'll ask you the same question in a different way. So if we look at the history of economic growth, typically very few countries grow at 5 to 6% over multiple decades, right? So South Korea, Taiwan, possibly Japan, and China. Okay. So why 6% back then? I mean, 6% is very good.
Well, you see, they grow at 6% up to a point where they hit 5 figures GDP per capita in dollars. That's the trick. And they grow at more than 6% most of that time when they're at our levels of per capita. So when South Korea was a cultural country, economy, is great. Economy. So, Bombay, Samana. So this $3,000 per capita, all the happy ending movies you mentioned, Thailand, South Korea, Taiwan, they were growing at 7, 8, 9%, even Japan. In fact, even Western Europe after the war was growing at 6, 7% plus for the first 20 years. Then obviously, again, the basic rate catches up. It's much more difficult, but it's very easy to grow at, not easy. It's relatively easier to grow at 8 to 10% when your per capita income is $2,000, $3,000. It's much more difficult to do that when you're standing first in class. When your per capita income is $7,000, $8,000. And because it is difficult, I can count the countries that have succeeded on my right hand. On my left hand, I would need many more fingers to count the failures. For India, when I'm now 58 years old, I always said to myself, "Ye picture abhi baki hai." Till the last 10 years. And I'm not saying there are no solutions, I'm not saying it's too late. But if we continue on this path, then I'm afraid we are not going to be able to attain what apparently my aspirations, I'm sure yours is, and our Prime Minister's aspirations, which is Viksit Bharat, by 2047. It's just mathematically impossible, right? Quite apart from equity issues and distribution. But that, again, there's good news there. Thailand is a great country. India will be a great country. We will not be Pakistan. That should bring me 50% of the audience going by voting trends, and we will not be Pakistan. You should be happy with that. We will not be Burkina Faso. We will not be Nepal. But we will not be China in one side.
So, if again, since we're talking about the history of economic growth, so if you look at countries which have gone from being developing countries to becoming developed countries, they have typically gone the manufacturing route, right? India, on the other hand, is a sort of an exception where we have, I don't think it's by default, but it's ended up like that we've gone through the services route, right? Now, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who pretty much has a habit of commenting on everything and anything these days, along with, I'm sorry to say, some other old men at Infosys, who were great businessmen. What they did for our country was huge. But, expertise is in, I'm just ranting a little here. Expertise is in extremely narrow areas, right? You could build a great IT company, it doesn't mean you know everything about it. So, Nandan Nilekani has been talking about India going the services route. Now, I grew up in a public sector colony. Okay? My father used to work for Coal India. And as I like to joke, both Mahendra Singh Dhoni and me are products of Nehruvian socialism. Given that Dhoni's father also used to work for a public sector entity. Now, I grew up on a road called the Kake Road. And it was called the Kake Road because the road went to Kake, where the Central Institute of Psychiatry used to be located in Ranchi, the Pagalkhana basically. So Ranchi, before Dhoni, was famous for its Pagalkhana. And so I grew up on a road where there were 3 Coal India colonies, and the entire services economy of that area the banks, the puchkawalas, the pan beauties, the ration shops, the grocery cows, what we call quick commerce now, essentially survived because someone somewhere was digging up coal. Someone somewhere was digging up coal, which is why people earn money in that area, and that money then got passed on to the services business. So my question to you, Rathin, is that, for services businesses to thrive, there has to be a core economic activity, right? I mean, like, you take the case of the IT companies setting up shop in Bangalore first, Bengaluru, then, Hyderabad, Chennai, Pune, and then, everything from real estate to drivers to cooks, right? So, how is it that India, or is it possible for India to take the so-called services route to economic growth? Or have we missed the manufacturing bus?
Well, most of India, but not all of it, has missed the manufacturing bus. And I think we can learn quite a few lessons from comparing the Indias that have not missed the manufacturing bus and the Indias that have missed the manufacturing bus. And where we are sitting, my state, the state of Maharashtra, is somewhere in between. Because Maharashtra has a very heady mix of both manufacturing and non-manufacturing, but there is an issue. Many countries see this, but Maharashtra reflects a high rate. It has to do with where the spending is. But Tamil Nadu has a high share of manufacturing in India. Tamil Nadu has the crappiest airport in South India. In South India, I know. The airport is horrid. It's vandalism. So, Cochin is great, Hyderabad is great, Bangalore is great, even Vizag is great. Mysore airport is brilliant. Coimbatore is great. Madras airport is great. And I talk to the people in Tamil Nadu, they say, why do you have this solid airport? Apart from the fact we insist. So I'm going to use the public sector. They say, we don't need an airport. The airport is not central to the getting to business. You set up to. That's why you get to your hospital. So, my God, Bangalore airport is an important like of Bengaluru. Something. That's why we need two terminals and a good idea. But Hyderabad airport, we are all the time talking about Hyderabad airport because we want to grow it, because we want TCC to have service. But the result of that is that of the 4 South Indian states, something I wanted to talk about later, let me put this way. In Telangana, the top 10% of my population in Telangana is very prosperous. In Tamil Nadu, the top 20% of my population, 22% of my population, is very prosperous. Very prosperous, what do I need? It requires predominantly young people to understand, because also I feel to take job post with very party unpacks. When there are rankings time, because of the top 8% of the population. In Tamil Nadu, 20% of freshers joining manufacturing, and even some senior workers will be in companies. That is one reason. Now, take another thing which I get very fed up with myself. Take the great state of Uttar Pradesh. When I was a child, if you drove from Delhi to Allahabad, Uttar Pradesh was an industrialized state. Yes.
Okay, that comes through.
Leave Ghaziabad around that nonsense. Leave Ghaziabad. Meerut was an industrial township. Abhi ek zamindari style, like a Tagore film type, Khandar is sitting there. I remember it was a vibrant industrial center. It was called Modi Nagar. Bilkul Tagore ka, wo ideal for Tagore. Zamindari behel jese, yeah, Lali Podi ko kick rati by London mein. But Modi Nagar was called. Bareilly was an industrial town. Muradabad had brass centers. कानपुर क्या शहर था बॉस? अरे वहां पे 5-star होटल होता था जब सब तमिलनाडु में भूखे थे और टेस्ट मैच होती थी. टेस्ट मैच उसमें ग्रीन पार्क का
That's quite a good view.
जीपी होती है बट बाय फोर्स और कोई जगह है नहीं करने को. नहीं करता. Anyway, तो कानपुर में there was an airport. Now that's been divided. एक इंडिगो फ्लाइट जाता है to Bangalore. Those days there were actually flights to Kanpur as they were to capital from Bombay and then I'll drive north to Gorakhpur. You will be surprised. Gorakhpur has major sugar processing industry. Agra was an industrial town. Tajmehal market through leather, जूते वहां बनते थे. सब खत्म. Cheap factories in Allahabad closed, and they're doing what I'm calling plain sea. So basically, the question you have to ask about the decline in manufacturing in India is, why did UP deindustrialize? That tell you something very interesting about manufacturing, which is very important in a country like India, where I believe sociology is at the root of our problems. And I'm from Bombay. The moment I went to North India when I was 18, I saw it. You know, the great thing I like about manufacturing is democratic. You can sit in an ad agency or an Infosys and you can do gender discrimination. You can do caste discrimination. You get away. It's not on the bottom line. Manufacturing you can't afford. I tell you why. I'll give you an example of something you guys are probably familiar with. Most of you don't know what manufacturing is, I guess. Indigo Air, the Indian aviation industry, has the highest number of female pilots in the world. Why? Because in the cockpit, you have to be democratic. You can't say to the lady home at your man's name, the plane take off and you'll die. Right? Similarly, in manufacturing, to be democracy to some extent, I'm not saying you can't have any misogyny or any caste discrimination, is democratic. That removes a major barrier to making money. And for that reason, manufacturing is actually very important in countries because the development transformation that comes from manufacturing brings with it a level of economic democracy that both liberates and increases efficiency and rates of return in economy. Jati khatam ho jata hai, misogyny most important khatam ho jata hai. And I think one of the constraints you're facing is not that happening. Now, what happens when you don't do manufacturing, what's happening in UP and what's happening in Bombay, is rent seeking. That's not making money. Money making, I'm from Bombay, is dhanda. माल बनाओ, उसको बेचो, प्रॉफिट बनाओ, खर्च जाओ, मजा करो, ठीक है? लेकिन rent seeking is what? Rent seeking is what Bombay has seen over the last 30 years with all the money. This building and many others, they were once manufacturing units here. I have a frightening statistic to tell you. The money that the people who sold these land pieces to build these things, the money they made from those transactions exceeded in contemporary prices the profits they made for the 82 years before that when they ran manufacturing units. So if you're going to do that, you're going to end up with a country, and this is not just India. I lived in Brazil, the same thing happened there. I've seen it happening in Thailand, where I lived also, as Ronnie told you. I've seen it happening in countless countries. That if you, when manufacturing collapses, that you say, I have services. What you're really saying is that the majority of activity in the country is going to be rent seeking. So in Hyderabad, we're very excited. It's a big opportunity in Hyderabad. We're going to get a lot of GCCs coming in, thanks to Trump. Okay? Because those guys are saying that we have to keep our bottom line. So if we can't get H1Bs in America, they're going to bring the business to Hyderabad. Okay? But what are people getting excited about Hyderabad? What's going to happen to the land value? What's going to happen to the... So everybody in Hyderabad is waiting for GCCs to come, not to make money, but to make rents. That is why I think our ennobled IT people, and they should know because they've done the same thing in Bangalore, friend. They really should know. Are missing the bus. Services do not survive without the prospect of rents. Manufacturing does. Services is not as democratic as manufacturing. And therefore it is essential for every country because you do not transform, grow long and prosper, you've seen Star Trek, unless you also democratize the country, reduce misogyny, get rid of caste and other sort of efficiency barriers to economic development. That is the report that manufacturing gives you. That's services.
So, just to continue the conversation, so what do you do? मतलब solution क्या है? क्योंकि मतलब जैसे we are all brought up writing exams in which there is a right answer for every question, right? So what is the right answer?
Right answer तो मैं चलो एक और it's actually so simple. So let me start by saying that I get irritated when people talk to me about how do we solve India's employment problem. You can't solve anybody's employment problem by doing a horrible thing called creating jobs. The only way you can create jobs is by hiring clerks in the government. There is no other way you can create jobs. Activities generate jobs. The question we've got to ask is, why do we not have the activities in this country, even at 6% growth, that are generating jobs? Now, that's complex answer, but I can tell you, what I'm going to tell you now are going to be activities, and before anyone asks me anything about AI, the 5 activities I'm going to mention, where we are failing, AI will only help us. Okay? But there's a trick. The visioning trick here is this. So far, India, the India story, has been, since 1991, till we started following. Started in 2008, by 2014, started nothing with Congress behavior. So business started. long time. But after 2016, the chickens have come into use. Sorry, not chicken, fish. Kattu has come out. Sorry, so, what? See, I can only get my personal example. I'm going to take about 3-4 questions. जब मैं पहला नौकरी मिला ना मुझे विंटेज का क्या मुझे salary was about 5,500 rupees. I was paying income tax, good salary. I was paying income tax. And I could dream in 10 years of buying I had no intention of doing so ever. Like, could have been a principal dream of buying a flat in Gandhi in 10 years. Gandhi was very remote there. It was like Palghar. Maybe Palghar is now city center and fine dining. I don't know. But Gandhi was quite great. Or Asankuch. Which is also that the large part. So, that is not true now. But my life was also aided by the following fact. Or not my life. The lives of people who came after me and that I was brought in. The journey that happened in this country between 1990 until Vijayawada retired. That's what I call the golden age of India, Mark I. So let me explain to you this. My salary was 5,500 rupees. A simple Maruti car in those days, I wanted to buy a car, 4 days. 5,500 is about, Maruti car in those days, about like 80,000. 2.5 years salary. Today, somebody who is not paying income tax and gets, let's say, 80,000 rupees a month. How much is the Maruti car? About 5 lakhs. Right? Fair? 6 months salary. Just look at the change in what we call it is called relative prices. From 2.5 years salary, it costs now 6 months salary. My girlfriend was in Delhi, so the Bombay-Delhi air tickets, I remember, used to cost 3,500. Now, thanks to Indigo, it costs 4,500 a good day. I've not been, I don't know, flights are diverted for Kumbh and all that. You know, a good day. Okay, make that very important. So, in relative terms, today 70,000 rupees, that's like 3 days salary. AC. My time it was 4 months salary. AC for you is 1 month salary. So the prices of things that PLUs like us, people like us, bought between 1991 and 2008, there was a major transformation. And I income that. So the demand of this sector went up massively. That was the India story. So when I came back to India in 2013, I asked people in the city, my fellow economists, some of you are here, some of you may remember, I said, boss, what are these leading indicators? Because we are used to leading indicators, fast moving. So we have fast moving indicators. I just come from, various countries I know. So they said, air travel, FMCG, then, upmarket housing. I said, actually, fast moving indicators. This is only the top 10% is what they consume. But that was good enough, you see, because top 10% in India was about 140 million people. That's a market bigger than Germany. With 140 million people, तुम्हारा Porsche भी बिकेगा, तुम्हारा BMW भी बिकेगा, तुम fine dining भी करोगे, तुम foreign भी जाओगे, सब कुछ होगा. For the top of that top, and that's still a large market. The top of that top is 10 million people. That's a lot of seats to balance, right? And so then we also India is going great because we go to London now to respect you and think cheap. But that can't last beyond the point. And so what you're seeing now is that income is plateauing out. And this has happened in all the countries I mentioned, where picture failed. Where pictures succeed, what happens is, I'm not talking about poor people. I'm talking the top 10, right? You need to figure a way in which you make the next 20% prosperous. Not the bottom 50. Bottom 50 suddenly, give them subsidy. But the next 20% have to become prosperous. Their demand has to be met with your resources. Then you will increase their incomes and you get prosperity from 10 to 30. Then you move from 30 to 50. That's called a virtuous cycle. You don't stop at 10 and get stuck at 10 like we have. What do people who earn between 10 and 30%, that category I'm talking about, they're all way above upper category. They're all earning 2 to 3 to 4 times the minimum wage. Okay, these are not poor people. I repeat, people get confused. They are not poor. What do they want? What do we want? Without subsidy. They want to basically buy a square meal without subsidy. You all live in India. I'm not in London. You know that you don't get a square meal without subsidy, and you're subsidizing 800 million people. So you're definitely subsidizing some people who are in that. So top 10, then next 20. You want to buy clothes. You buy clothes. But in India, we have a paradox. I don't know his shirt, certainly his shirt, if it's Indian. This shirt was probably from Marks and Spencer. Some of your shirts from Marks and Spencer. They cost about 3,500 rupees. They're all made in India. Wonderful. We have Bharat Manana, But if you want to buy a 200 rupee shirt, 82% of those shirts are imported from Bangladesh and Vietnam. So we can't supply the top 20% with the demand they have for their shirts. Going to the market and housing, housing means what? Top 20% wants ticket prices of 20, 25 lakhs, 30 lakhs. Financial system is not able to provide that. Now somebody's going to tell me about some great NBFC that is doing it boutique. I'm not talking boutique. This should be 60% of our business. 60% business should not be fashion now or in whatever part. It should be like these 25, 30, 40 lakhs. Not happening. Okay? Education. It's a mess. All these people have gated themselves. I don't have a single friend my age whose child has studied in India. I have one with that. The rest of them are all, it's affordable for them. It's expensive, it's affordable. They've all got very few with scholarships. Unlike my time, finally healthcare. Healthcare is affordable, that's why I'm here, for the rich, but not for them. Now, if we can't supply these 5 things that not the poor, but the next 20% want, without subsidy and affordable prices, we are in a trap. So the solution is supply them. Now note, finally, all these 5 things will create jobs. इसमें कोई AI का problem नहीं. Right? I'm not talking quotas. I'm talking teachers. Education is jobful. Health is jobful. Building housing is jobful. Textiles is jobful. But we are still stuck meeting the demand of the top 10%, and that demand is petering out, which is why we are in a situation where consumption is not firing, investment is not firing, we can't export, and we are heading towards that trap. So my solution is very simple. Let's change our strategy and do a headline. Even if we have only 6% growth, we are better off if 60% of that growth comes from these 5 things, at least these 5 things. About 20-25% comes from PNUs, people like us. And about 10 to 15% comes from exports. I'll be a happy bunny, and my India story then will be revived to my great relief. I hope it happens in my lifetime. I don't have high hopes for political reasons, but I do hope it happens. So I have a solution. And I first expressed this in 2019. And I'm glad to say that finally, about 2024, I find people accepting what I'm saying with great reluctance. It's not easy for us. We have benefited, not the others. We have benefited from this benefit. We've had a good comfort. So it takes time, but I'm afraid maybe it's almost today.
So in a way, you're like Karl Marx. So people didn't give, him how when he lived. But in the world, I mean, your point of view took time to percolate and for people to sort of appreciate what you were telling us. So, Rathin, I'll throw some data at you. Lots of data. So it's in a way a continuation of what he's already said. And then I'll sort of expect you to repeat whatever you've said in a slightly different way. Okay? Just to sort of reinforce the point. Right? So, so these are things that I have made my living off writing about in the last few years, and really not, and typically this does not go down well with people. And so last week I was essentially having dinner with the CFO of a company, a pretty large company, and he said, "आप ये सब बकवास कर रहे हो, पर आप मुझे बात बताइए, मैंने जो Mercedes खरीदी थी, उसमें 6 महीने का वेटिंग था. So how is economic growth not happening? 6 months waiting, which basically means that people are really queuing up to buy that car." Then he went on to explain how people in Bombay are buying bigger houses, people in Mumbai are buying bigger houses, and because everyone in Mumbai is buying bigger houses than they used to, because they don't want to save for the children, they want to live life. He was giving this kind of. But the fact of the matter is that I recently saw an ad for a 2 BHK in Bombay, which with a size of around 330 square feet. So 330 square feet. My mother's father, my Nanaji, used to work for Coal India, and he retired as a director in one of the companies. His bathroom was bigger than that. So just to sort of give you a little bit of data, two-wheeler sales in India, domestic two-wheeler sales, peaked in 2018-19, we still haven't reached anywhere near that. Non-suburban railway travel peaked in 2012-13. It's 12 years. Air traffic hasn't really grown after the pandemic. Teledensity was the highest in 17-18. If you hear any of the FMCG CEOs talking, they have been talking about how a K-shaped economic recovery is happening, and now even that K-shape is not really holding up. There are more people who work in agriculture now than was the case before the pandemic. So 43% of the workforce was in agriculture before the pandemic. Now it's 46%. Now the problem is that agriculture has what economists call huge disguised unemployment, which basically means that the work can be done with fewer people, but just because more people are there, you do the work with more people. Just a couple more, and this data point I find particularly interesting is the fact that household debt in India has crossed 50% of disposable income, and within that household debt, if you leave out the home loans, so which is basically the non-home loans part of household debt, which is essentially consumption, is amongst the highest in the world. There are more than 2,000 cash transfer schemes which are run by different state governments. 2,000, not 200. Okay. The low-end smartphone sales have been contracting. Luxury housing has doubled. So I can go on and on with this. And I would like to end with two very interesting data points. The total number of derivative contracts, futures and options traded on the National Stock Exchange, which is the largest stock exchange in India, in 2024-25 stood at 103 billion contracts, 103. Okay. In 18-19, this was at 3 billion. So from 3 billion, we've gone to 103 billion, right? 18-19. In 2018, it's gone from 3 billion to 103 billion, right? So, pura desh satta khil raha hai. The number of, and this is to sort of give you a contrasting point, from October on, since SEBI started cracking down on derivatives trading, the total number of derivative trades in October were around 13 billion at the NSE. And in March, they were down to around 2.6 billion. So it's fallen from 13 billion in October to 2.6 billion, right? Whereas Dream Eleven, has 22 crore members. So my conspiracy theory is that people, because when you're used to gambling, or for that matter, when you're used to doing something and that something is no longer available or it's expensive, then you try to find a substitute. So my conspiracy theory, Rathin, is that people who are essentially gambling with FMO are now gambling, on games, or we like to call them games now. So anyway, I think, what do you have to say about all this? And if you can summarize it for the audience.
You can see I'm an optimist now, because I can give you more data that goes that way. I mean, I can tell you that I don't know why not watches IPL anymore, but I watch it for the ads.
Very boring.
Yeah, but I watch it for the ads. And the ads are all about gambling. There's nobody's selling soap or IPL ads. Nobody's selling anything else. Nobody's even selling, just selling gambling. So it is depressing, but again, I have some sympathy because, look, if I don't have a papa who left me a house, a lot of people in have papas who live in a house, you may not think so. There are. Then, if I really want to meet the aspirations by which I was, in the society I was born in, and I'm 20 years old, I will gamble. At least I want to be an alcoholic. That's the next thing. Or getting to, sort of. And there is the equivalent of that. I call them sarvahara. Straight line. Maybe I'm not proud of it, but let me give you a number. In 2012, there were 80 million people in this country between the ages of 18 and 40 who were not looking for a job and were not in full-time training. Today the number has gone to 160. This is your demographic dividend time. 160 million people, which means nobody in this room, so you never see them. They can't be seen. You will not see ever. Are neither looking for a job, nor are at full-time employment or training. Which means they're doing that. Then you ask yourself why you have kabadiyas and all that. And why people, I want to be curious, very important. But how come people are able to afford to spend 28 days preparing for these things, etc., etc.? I'm not talking about people who pay for it, I'm talking about people who organize it. Because a large chunk of them are part of this Sarvahara movement. And so I can go on that way, but this is eminently reversible if we recognize the problem. I will, however, tell you that there's no point naming a political party. I have written extensively on this, but I have my thesis is, I'll just tell you what happened in 2008. I keep coming from India, but 2008 I came back to work for government, and I met a very eminent economist called Monte Carlo. We had just started MGNR, I said, these were Vijayabhagya times. Economy was booming, everything was booming. We didn't have a fiscal deficit one year. It was great. Okay. And I asked him, I said, Monte, this is India's like this, flying. It's like India's on MDA. And why are we having an employment guarantee scheme now? We've understood 10 years. And he sort of fudged the question. The reason, and that's why I'm saying it's not partisan, is that basically for the last 20 years, and now it's become very acute, the Indian state has moved from being what was traditionally known as a development state to being what I call a compensatory state. The game in the state is in not to increase prosperity. If you watch Portek, you know what I mean. I like that word. I don't like it. Samriddhi. Prosperity. But to compensate people for the failure of the system to give them prosperity. Acha, tera education nahi wali. Oh, you're a woman, you're having a bad time, free bus. That's what we've been doing in ever increasing measure, and it's not BJP. It is DMK, it is Karnataka, it is Congress. Yeah, I mean, they were very cross-city, the Congress. I said, I don't like it. You're doing the same thing. Only thing is BJP is doing with compensation plus, you all know what? Good thing. Yeah. And Congress is only doing compensation. I said, you always lose. So they have one more thing in their head. It's a lot of people like, that's why they get voted. And so every political party I talk to is only in the compensation. Nobody is in the prosperity. And I like prosperity because the young people here should understand one thing. I always congratulate my students, those under 25. I say, I'm a perennial optimist. It may not sound like it. I said, one wonderful thing has happened thanks to you guys. I'm sorry for you personally, because I didn't have to do it. I got out, and everybody in my generation prospered. But you guys will not prosper. You can't even pay income tax in your job. So now you're not talking about them and lifting them up out of poverty or lifting them up. Now it's about you also. So you better get some solidarity going with people less fortunate than you for yours. The state is not going to do it. We are not going to do it because we are winners. So you will have to create a coalition where there's a political movement where ideology moves from compensation plus something else, you know what it is, and into an ideology of prosperity. That is the only way we're going to get that 10 to 30% lifted out of the very depressing data points that we made.
Okay. One final question on this section. So you talked about India becoming a compensatory state, right? So, sometime in the mid-90s, before Shah Rukh Khan became the phenomenon that he is, he did a film called Oh Darling Ye Hai India. I don't know how many of you have seen it. So in that, the title song was obviously called Oh Darling Ye Hai India. And it had a line which went like, Jo bacha nahi, wo baant diya. So, can we afford this?
Anybody can afford it. I give an example of country I in Brazil afford it. When I was in Brazil, I was part of the elite.
So then someone has to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
For it to be...
It's much, you pay for it, it's cheap. It's cheap because once you attain the situation where permanent people like us, and if you cut it any way you like, South Indians versus North Indians, men versus women, 20-year-olds versus 50-year-olds. Cut it any way. Low high income versus low income. Once people like us are good, and this is well known in economics, and by the age units. But you have a system which is extremely unequal. What is my biggest fear? What should be my biggest fear? That all the people on the wrong side, because the majority will kill me. So in Brazil, I had electric alarms around my house. Abhi tak India mein wo halat nahi hai. Because you're already gating, you're getting everything. See, remember, when all this happens, what happens is that section gets more and more and more detached. When I was a kid, there was something actually called a train. Very interesting concept. You had to go to something called a station. And for that brief moment, even if I went to first AC, for that brief moment of 25 minutes, between stopping at that disgusting station and crossing the disgusting masses of India and going to that disgusting platform, getting into my carriage, which was hopefully not second class. I have a big traffic airport, but no money goes. Then you actually merge with people in India. You actually dealt with the people who were not like me. In my neighborhood, there were people who were less fortunate than me and more fortunate than me. If you live in a gated community, that's impossible, right? So only political action is going to solve this problem, but the Indian voter is not interested at this time in political action to solve this problem because there is no leadership that is providing any kind of incentive, not in the opposition, not in the BJP, for political action to solve this. मैं कम्युनिस्ट नहीं हूँ, मुझे विकसित भारत 27 मत दो. That sounds like fantasy है. तुम्हें ये नहीं हुआ कि 2030 का क्या होने वाला है? तुम बड़े-बड़े बातें कर रहे हो 20 साल बाद. Yeah, I'm not impressed. And slogans are great for communists. I'm not a communist. I don't use it. So just tell me what the GDP of India is going to be 2028. What I've described is anything going to change materially and why it is changed. Then we are having a conversation about future perspective, which we are not having now. And that, I think, is what the political economy in this country is all about if we are going to prosper beyond not being Pakistan.
But does the voter have choice? ये see, हमारे ये बाजार है, ये इस बाजार में ये माल मिल रहा है और वोटर क्या करेगा बेचारा?
माल ऐसे माल क्यों मिल रहा है? ऐसे काफी वोटर होंगे तो खुशी नहीं तो अंग्रेज लोग रहते नहीं इस देश है ना. वोटर तो लाट साहब है, हम बैठे हैं. So it's a combination. You need people who will come up and be able to articulate dissent. But for that, there has to be palpable dissent and dissatisfaction, for which a settlement within the current frame that only the top 10% will work, will be happy, and even the next 20% will not have become more. And by the way, I should give you an interesting calculation. This is all working. I'm not saying it's not deliberate. There's enough that census done amongst economists who work on this very economic that the two sections of society that have benefited hugely in India since 2016 are the top 5% and the bottom 10%. That's why we've reduced poverty. See, poverty is boring for me. That's why I wanted zero. Because poor people cannot contribute to the economy. I'm sick and tired of poverty as an economist. I mean, I'm sympathy with human beings. But the poor are not economic actors because they're poor. They borrow money, they're not good, there are all sorts of problems. They're unhealthy, they're badly educated, their productivity is low. So the solution is to reduce poverty. We have reduced poverty in this country to single digits. I buy it. Not in Bihar, but in most of India. To single digits. But we have done it, and there are two problems in the way we have reduced poverty. We have done it essentially for compensatory state. People who are, the 9% who are in poverty are the people who are not even benefiting from compensation. And let me tell you why that is the case. I'll give you two facts. 697, for every 10 Indians who left poverty, every year 7 fell back. So our net delta, when you said tax poverty, was 3, right? But 7 who were not poor were getting poor, and 10 who were poor were getting not poor. So otherwise, we would have eliminated poverty by 1990. And this has been going on for a long time. What does that mean? That people are out of poverty. Between the bottom 20% and the bottom 50%, you are extremely vulnerable. एक दिमागी हो गई, one cyclone, one adverse event, you are screwed. So then, that vulnerable population cannot be supported on the basis of the taxes that only 7% of the population pays. Again, for that reason, I need the top 30% of this country to be prosperous, tax-paying. Then under the taxes, to reduce vulnerability to the bottom half. So even if you're a left-wing person and you're worried about the bottom 50, you will need to increase prosperity from 10 to 30. And every country, that's been the only way it's happened. First the top 10, then the top 30, then the top 50, then you get the money to do something about the bottom 50.
So now, I guess we're done with what we had discussed. One part of the thing, now we talk tariffs, which is which is the hot topic now. So, क्या लगता है? Should I start with an anecdote? Okay, so anyone who sort of started watching cricket in the 80s and the 90s would know that up until at least the mid 1980s, would know that India regularly lost to Pakistan, right? And I think the change came sometime in 1996 when in the World Cup quarterfinal at Bangalore, back then it was Bangalore, India beat Pakistan thanks to Ajay Jadeja taking Waqar Yunus to the cleaners. A year later, in 1997, if you guys remember, India played a 5-match series against Pakistan at Toronto. for some reason, decided to play Pakistan in Canada. And we beat them 4-1, which was like, it was unheard of. India beating Pakistan by such a huge margin. And I think there were two stars of that series. One was Saurav Ganguly and his bowling, not his batting. And the other was a guy called Devashish Mohanty. Devashish Mohanty was the first cricketer to play for India from Odisha. And he regularly got Saeed Anwar out. Saeed Anwar at that point of time was perhaps the best ODI batsman in the world. Or maybe, second best after Sachin. So the interesting thing is that he kept getting out and he couldn't figure out. So basically when Mohanty was a fast bowler, for people who don't know, and he kept taking Anwar's wicket. And the problem was, Anwar did not know that after the ball, after Mohanty had bowled the ball and it hit the pitch, whether it would swing in or whether it would swing out. Right? So the story goes, and I don't know whether this is a true story, but the story goes that Saeed Anwar went to Sachin Tendulkar and asked him as to how can I play this guy? मतलब मैं देवाशीष को कैसे खेलूं? How do I play him? So Sachin apparently explained to him, जब देवाशीष ball फेंकता है, when he bowls the ball, even he doesn't know whether it will be in swing or out swing. So how are you going to figure out whether it will be in swing or out swing? So the point I'm trying to make is that the way this tariff thing is going is essentially depends on which side of the bed Mr. Donald Trump gets on any given morning. So it's sheer madness, the way things are. So, yeah.
I'm going to be again very optimistic about tariffs. And I really am. Because after a long time, other than the government's delivering a better quality of fiscal deficit, I think the Indian government has treated this just right. And on track record, I was very worried. Because, bolte bahut hai. But in that, they think in some period Hindi movie or something, or that stuff. Hum ye hai, hum wo hai, hum are there. Ab kuch bhi nahi hai. Our total share in world exports is 0.5%. We are the poorest country in the G20. I once explained this to somebody, I said, you're all from Bombay. We are in the G20 because we are Dharan. We are not Balbali. And the second poorest is Sahel. And Sahel is 3 times more prosperous than we. Okay. So hum khali Dharavi hai. You can't ignore Dharavi right now. You can't. But earlier, you couldn't ignore Dharavi Bombay, right? Dharavi was too big. It was a mass of gold. But I think this got to our heads after we did that G20 Gujarat, when we were the presidents. Got to our heads. And after that, we started saying all sorts of absurd things on the internet. India's strength was always keep quiet and do things undercover and never align yourself with anybody unless you absolutely have to. And this time we have done exactly that. I've worked with Piyush Goyal. I've actually listened to him saying this. We've had our differences. I've never had a high opinion with him, but boss, if there is anybody with approximating a statesman in that cabinet, now it is Mr. Goyal. You're MP. I actually from my evidence on this. I understand that China, but one thing is understood is what he said. That Donald Trump, what he said, depends on which side of the belly falls. What is India's reaction then? We need to know what he said, which side of the belly falls. If he falls this way, we need to know. If he falls that way, we need to know. So Elon Musk को भी खुश रखो, और China को भी खुश रखो, और सबको खुश रखो. And our diplomacy has been, देखो, this is your fight. We had some rules of the game. We used to oppose them, etc. Now the rules of the game have been changed. We'll wait for you to tell us what the rules are. तो जो भी तुम बोला करके, नहीं तो चाहे मेरा बैट ले जाएगा, वो मेरा बॉल ले जाएगा, तो कौन? तो and this is very good evidence. China approached India, I was told on Monday, and said, will you join us in Japan in our strategic stuff? And the Indian government, very mature, and state of financial history, obviously, so in a very mature fashion said, look, we don't hold that many US treasuries. We are a balance of payments deficit country, so we are regional spirit. तुम लोग करो. US को बोला कि देखो, we are not doing what they are doing. And we have to do this. So I'm very relieved because if we show this sort of pragmatism and lack of hubris and arrogance in the way we deal with domestic policy, I'd be far more upbeat about the potential for India's story to change than I am. Because in domestic politics, it's not say Hindi, speak Hindi, go to Tamil Nadu, do this, do that. It is all about division. If I get rid of divisions between X and Y, depending on the gods they worship, I'm now doing division on language, then I'm going to do division on whether people wear turbans or not, then I'm going to do division on something else. Everybody's playing this game. It's not that only BJP is now. That game is getting worse. Whereas in the international sphere, they're not doing this. And on tariffs, I can give you a comfort, I have to be a little mathematical. So the indicator of the impact that tariffs will have on us depends on the following. We are a balance of payments deficit country, which means we buy more from the rest of the world than the rest of the world gives us. Okay? That's second to the rest of the world. So we import more than we export. How we finance that come to? That's a different matter. You actually don't need to worry about. However, with the US, we have a balance of payments surplus. We send more to the US than we buy from the US. Trump ji wants that, he doesn't want that. अब हमने सब कुछ कर लिया. हमने track timings का price कम कर दिया. But these bloody hotels have not lowered the price. I was talking to the party in the ITC yesterday. I don't take that. I said, why have you not lowered the price? There are no tariffs from Asian one. वो क्यों करेगा? धंधा कर रहा है, उसको प्रॉफिट बनाना है.
उसके खरीद के भी रखा होगा.
खरीद वो सब बकवास बोल रहा था. मैंने कहा फिर I want to see next month. I want to see when why are you not announcing the price of that in Jack Daniels and Jim Beam or whatever crap bourbons that we buy from the US. And Harley Davidson bikes and that kind of thing. So he got happy for a while. Abhi kuch nahi hoga. Then we said it was so beautifully done. I mean, where the government of India, the sophistication, why can't they do it in domestic policy? They did a hawa with the journalists, and our journalists will eat pie with respect to it. If you do it nicely, you have to go and take a something. So, we said we are going to buy 35 F-35s from the US. And of course, the defense ministry said be responsible. So about 2 weeks after we said that, small thing came out in the Air Force saying, no such conversation has happened. But by then Trump had forgotten, yeah. So, but you have to deal with that guy according to who he is. So on tariffs, we have those negotiations are over. So here's the bottom. Let's say our balance of payment surplus with the US is 100. And let's say, and I'm quite confident we can negotiate that surplus to be 50. Which means we buy more US stuff, it will go to 50. I've done the math. If the BOP surplus with the US halves, then what happens is our current account, which is the difference between exports minus imports, that goes up, right? Because US, we have a lower surplus. So that's the numerator on the top of the fraction. Bottom is GDP. So all we have to do, but what we can do is increase our GDP by 0.3%. Actually 0.25, points. Just point. From 6, we have to go to 6 points. That will be enough to keep my current account deficit constant. That is, the deficit we have in the rest of the world is proportional. If that is constant, nobody in the world is going to get worried about giving us money through FDI or FII because that parameter will have to change. So it's manageable. Without doing import controls, without doing anything drastic, we are in a very good position. Second, we have a lot of reserves. So we have time to do this. So what we need to do is keep the negotiations going with Trump, open our options, and I'm very encouraged by the finance minister. 3 days ago, staying in London, I've never heard an Indian finance minister say this. हम तो कलयुग में थे ना, तो फिर सत्य युग में हम free trade deal sign करें. We think in those different times. 60 साल में. She said, I want this deal closed by Monday, end of. I've never heard an FM say that. And you see the BRICS, I live in London, I know some of this. They were so excited, India is going to sign. Now, once we sign that, and once we sign something with the EU, and once we're able to diversify, we're going to actually, Trump will then be aggressive. We're going to be in a much better position than we were before Trump, because we're finally woken up to the fact that to prosper on the International Trade Fund, we need to be extremely strategic, less boastful, diversify more, and play it properly. And all of this, I think we have made a very good beginning.
Okay, and this is obviously assuming that Trump does not throw any more surprises like this.
Any surprises he wants. So now he's saying he's busted with China. 125 to China. He said in the morning, I love China. I'm not going to increase the tariffs. It's okay.
So, let's talk about this a little more in the international sense of the term. Yesterday evening, I was at a event, and typically, as happens in Mumbai, whenever a fund manager has to speak, they come up with these, very interesting stories and try to make things simplistic. Simplistic, not simple. There's a huge difference between saying something which is very simple to understand and something which is extremely simplistic. This gentleman who loves storification, and people who follow fund managers would know who I'm talking about, essentially said something like, the US imports from China are less than 3% of the GDP, 2.8%. So what is the problem? So, I couldn't interrupt him in the middle of what he was saying. And, the first thought in my head was, if there is no problem, so itna raita kyun phaila rahe ho Donald? Right? I mean, why do this? Right? Why do this? If the US imports from China are less than 3% of the GDP, why do all this? Why get worried about this? So, how do you answer a question like that?
If the US imports from China less than 3% of GDP, we've got to ask what the US is importing from China. And if what the US is importing from China, while it is 3% of GDP, is a very important part of, let's say, discretionary consumption in the US. Right? I'll give you a very good example. Somebody got in touch with me this morning saying that there's a good demand for blenders coming from the US. No, Sumit one. Blender. Mixing. Because all those are coming from China. Huh?
Bajaj makes, so they basically, when they sell in India, you can see it's made in China.
It's made in China. Now, obviously, then if you're going to ban China from importing stuff, then the cost of blenders is going to go up in China. And we're not fools in India. We're going to sell at the cost that, the Chinese were done maybe 5% less. So if our tariff on us is 24% and China is 125%, and the Chinese costs go up, let's say, by 60%, and the tariff on us is 24, we sell at 50, we sell at 10 cents less. So you're going to get a cost push on the US consumer, like it or not. Second thing is, some of these things, they have no impact on GDP, such as the Americans have decided to penalize anyone who ships anything, to do anything with a ship coming from China or who does trade with China. That's going to increase costs in the US by 10%. Everything is not a percentage of US trade with GDP in isolation. That's how first-year undergraduate thinks. I hope this graduation is debate.
Also, the other interesting thing that I was reading was the fact that when US imports from China, not all the value add happens in China, right? So if, let's say a sneaker sells at $70 in the US, China has, the value add that has happened in China is a certain proportion of it. But that price also includes the wages in the US, the cost of the showroom, the marketing cost, the profit that that the seller is making. So, doesn't if sales of a particular product that are coming from China fall, then American businesses also get hurt, right? So see, it's like it's very easy to figure out the first order effects in economics, right? Our media, every time the RBI decides to cut the repo rate, तो अगले दिन खबर आ जाती है कि EMI will go down and consumption will go up. Now the trouble is that I have a humble request to all the journalists who are here. Please learn the PMT function on MS Excel. So the PMT function on MS Excel essentially lets you calculate the EMI. Okay. So if you're taking on, I'm sorry, I'm just blabbering a little here, but I think it's an important point. That if you take on a car loan of 5 and 6 lakhs, and it sort of has to be repaid over 5 to 6 years, and the interest rates, let's say, comes down from 10% to 9.75%, the EMI on that loan falls by 100 rupees. Now, no one's going to go buy a car because the EMI has fallen by 100 rupees, right? So, my question then to you is that, again, what is really happening here? I mean, why are we doing this? I just can't get my head around to the fact, and I've tried thinking about it from the other point of view. So, just one more point. So there is this guy called Steve Eisman. Yeah. So anyone who's seen The Big Short or read The Big Short by Michael Lewis would know that he was one of the guys who made a lot of money during the financial crisis of 2008 because he saw it coming and bet accordingly. Now, he has gone on record to say that, the way Trump is going about doing things will be beneficial for the US. And he has his reasons for it. I mean, you can watch the video, it's there on YouTube. I won't get into that. But what he says is if everyone else is rational about it, if everyone else, or like if Trump was rational about it, this wouldn't have been happening in the first place, right? So,
well, I've been talking to US economists. I know most recently this guy called Barry Summers, a rude guy, but he's pretty tortured.
yeah, but he's very, very smart guy.
He's a very, very smart guy, therefore he's not here. He's allowed to be rude. I'll do something. He's smart. So, you see, there is an interesting thing about the US, which is that the people who make a lot of money. So what Trump wants to have is his base increases in prosperity. If you look at yesterday's cabinet meeting, which was public and televised, everything he did was to make his base more prosperous and happy. His base lives, people vote for him in the other states, but his base lives largely in Texas plus an aspect. Of Texas, leave it aside, that's a petro state, commodity state. Okay. And then you have Florida, where lots of old people have not of money. So leave those two aside. Very populous. Where does the US make money? The US makes money, right? Everybody is. I forget Boeing and Caterpillar and all that. The US across history has made money by investing in R&D and getting huge first mover rents from innovations. Only the last one is AI and IT. But it's happened right from the beginning. Whether it was automobiles or FMCG or anything else. Right? These guys don't live. They're not Trump acrobats, except Elon Musk, who's a maniac. They live in New York, they live in Connecticut, they live in Chicago, they live in the West Coast, they live in Portland, they live in Seattle. These guys are going to get very badly hurt by these tariffs, and that is political. Something that Trump and his cabal wants. So these guys will resist. And I'll give you one example of that resistance if it impact India positively. Huh? I was very intrigued in Hyderabad, 400 acres of land. Suddenly the CM put all his political capital to grab that land. And all my environmental people, oh God, they invented AI pictures of deer and that little deer. And they pretend it was part of the university. I'm not saying it should be cut. I mean, I'm sure it's very bad. I'm big supporter of all individuals that don't make jokes. Really competitions. But similarly, I'm not making jokes about that land or environment. But I was very curious. So I asked his principal advisor, I said, well, why is he hemorrhaging political capital in 400 lousy acres of land? And I was told because rental yields in Hyderabad have gone up by 46% over the last 3 months. I asked why? Because all those guys, one thing that's going to happen there, for example, it's India, hits the rich people on the coast in America, is that H-1B visas are going to dramatically reduce, right? Now, America has made a lot of money out of people like us, and not really people like me, but who are civilian, who go there and work for like bargain basement prices, and are better off that they were here, and make money. And by the way, the H-1B visa ecosystem is a very unstable ecosystem. You get a job, they're not gig workers here. I have friends like that. They get a job for 9 months, they lose a job for 3 months, they get a job for 2 years. And 90% of them are like that. If you're bichai, you should get eyes of the sun and not that. You have the social capital, then become kind of, don't get full back. Most of them are like, sort of gig workers. Those gig workers now are not going to get visa. So what are you going to do? They're coming here to hire gig workers. What's that going to do to Trump's strategy? Because what's going to happen, therefore, literally, is a reduction of GDP in the US, where the BCCs in India will capture it. How is he going to think about that with tariffs? There's nothing he can do about that with tariffs. So how this will play has to be done by doing what I'm trying to do now. He'll understand the political economy of the US. Who gains and who loses? For India, I'm saying, and for people like us. From what Trump is doing. Then see where there are opportunities and where there are threats. With the threats, try and mollify him and play all parties. With the opportunities, grab them with both hands. So I'm sorry about the wetlands in Hyderabad. Same thing is happening in Bangalore. Same thing is happening in Jaipur. I'm now done my research. But I think this is too good opportunity to miss. And what you're going to get, therefore, and this will raise our GDP easily by 0.3 to 0.5 basis points and nullify any reduction in the balance of payment surplus if we are able to execute it. And if some bureaucrat doesn't come up with some rule and throw everything into batch like Vodafone. I'm just terrified of like 97 batch at one paper. This country, because they're the biggest enemies to the execution. I think we're in a very good place with tariffs, but this is the kind of, very micro level political economy thinking that we will have to do in India to basically navigate this very difficult time.
Okay, one last question. So, are you basically trying to say that Trump, in order to appease his MAGA supporters, Make America Great Again supporters, does not want to sell jet engines and software and wants to make MAGA caps in America. Is that what it is?
Well, he doesn't make everything in America. But if he can't make MAGA caps, he doesn't want credit software to win US.
So, we'll now open it up for any questions that you might have.
Hi, my name is Sanjay Shah. Thank you for the discussion over the last 1 hour. My question is that if you just think about India and the policy making, where we are at this stage, are there any 2 or 3 things or more that could make you more excited or more positive about the prospects of India from a 5 to 10 year perspective?
Yes, listening to me would be a good idea. That's one. The second, I think, is a major challenge. I'd be very excited, not excited, but I would watch cautiously and hope for a positive outcome on what is coming to be known now as the north side of the world. You see, that's an existential question for me. And how we deal with it is very important. It's really not helpful to have a finance commission which is full of talking. We're not that. But it is important because India is a very funny place. The majority of the population and therefore the political power is in the north and the east. And all the economic power is in the south. Whether it is GDP or human development, north and west. West also. South and west. Whether it is GDP or human development or anything else, the economic power is in the south and west. We need to solve this problem, and the problem is only 3 ways to solve it. I don't see how these are going to happen. When we came to a deal, as Trump would say on delimitation, say we keep it in touch. 3 ways we can solve it is UP people and Bihari people and Biongs and Jharkhandis or whatever, their growth goes up and there's convergence between the southwest and the north. Then I can say, okay, let's postpone delimitation and we'll sort it out when we're more of this economic thing. But that's difficult. Second is that Biharis become Telugus. We basically get Biharis to come to and, speak politely and, sort of become part of this ecosystem. That is not going to happen because of the caste system. In a sentence, I can take some later. While Brahmins in Maharashtra and Bengal, I should know, are interoperable because of Shraddh, Gotra and all that. I've tested this in Hyderabad. The Yadavs of Andhra have no clue what Mulayam Singh Garu is about. They don't see this Yadav, and that's very important. Caste groups. We meet them to feel affinity for each other, like Brahmins and Manish. So for caste reasons, integration is not good. It's not so much bad. And the third is that South becomes 15 times more prosperous than the North. And then we can tell them to go to hell. That's not going to happen either because the South has the same bad habits we have written about it as the North. Simple story. Kerala has high human development, no poverty, a lot of education, everybody celebrating Kerala. You go there, it's like Bombay. People are driving without helmets. People are driving on the wrong side of the road. Same things the Bhaiyas do in Kerala. What is the point of all that human development?
Just like Delhi, not like Bombay, just like Delhi.
So, yeah, Bombay also.
Delhi is another level.
Another level is
Absolutely another level.
definitely a single person in these high human development paradises. A woman in Kerala can stay there. There's huge misogyny there. Not that different from Bihar. It's not Delhi or Noida or something, but it's not that much better. And neither is Bombay, to be very honest. So, these are the things, paradoxically, these negative things that bind the North and South. If you're able to move on that, because these are social touch points, then, as I've said about the economy, it is the sociology and the politics that is holding India. If we get some social quick wins, then I think I will be much more optimistic about India than I am now. Because that will also do one thing that I would really like to see. What we call engineers, we call them circuits. You know why we call them circuits? Because they think of any problem as, the circuit has to be closed. Circuit, and they're not able to think beyond that. So in India, everything that is a social problem, we are looking for a technocratic fix on it. Education is a problem, we've got technically fixed it. Open teacher training institutes. So skill development is a problem, in fact, start a ministry of skill development. The more we are able to think as a society, and I'll give you an example of how we used to think as a society. I'm in Bombay, so I'll take Bombay as an example. Mumbai, whatever. What are the colleges of Mumbai? They're called Ruia College, St. Xavier's College, and Kenin College. They're not Maharashtra government number 2 college, Chhatrapati Shivaji College. Why did these people open colleges before? They open colleges because there's a social movement for education. So if we can bring that social element in, then these problems that seem technocratically interactive will become fundamental.
Can I just ask why manufacturing in India requires much more interface with problem compared to service? So that is problematic in that. The second point is rent seeking. Why isn't it also taking place in Tamil Nadu? Why is it going to take this in Bombay?
It is taking place in Tamil Nadu, but to a much lower extent than in Bombay, dramatically. And the reason it's not taking place in Tamil Nadu is that they have social good. They are socially much more advanced than Mumbai. And that social advancement means that then there's racy resistance. And therefore, this is in Mumbai, the complete capture of these leases by, 5. There's a lot of this in the Tamil Nadu that happened. If you do an example, again, I'm from Bombay. My wife is from there. So I go to Kerala, I go to the street and say, what is discuss leases? It's discussed. It's sort of like slums. Those are not slums, no fishermen slums. I said, Bombay didn't give a shit about fishermen slums. Let's demolish them. And we'll build like high rises. And we'll put 8-class things. Like we've done. But while they put the new fishermen in the balance, right? And there's something higher than the people. That's what we do in Bombay. We elitize this. In Tamil Nadu, you can't do that. And that democratic social impulse allows manufacturing to proceed in the far more egalitarian way that is ever possible. Actually, my way is not so bad. It's not so bad. But that's very difficult to replicate in a place like Bihar. Or even a place like Jharkhand, it used to once upon a time an industry place. That's lost.
But the Jharkhand industry place was largely Tatas and Bombs.
Yeah. Really big. So you would expect people to come and build over that area. And that area.
Yeah, hi.
You don't have time.
This is Lalai, and I've been reading your columns and mentioned Lahadar War Nokri and the fact that the North needs manufacturing. So, what are the 4 or 5 policy prescriptions specifically that are manufacturing there for those who want to buy 200 rupee shirts? Is it a political economic problem or is it something else? And the second question is, Dr. Bala has been writing that.
I'm not going to change this.
Oh,
The first question is great. Thank you.
So see, I grew up in Ranchi. And something that I have never really gotten my head around to is the fact that, Ranchi is a very good place where IT companies should be set up. Right? Like something like a Bhubaneswar. Like Bhubaneswar has some IT. So why is it that, Jharkhand doesn't get these kind of investments? If you have any.
I can answer your question first and go to yours. Why would I want to live in Ranchi? Sucks. I'd rather live in Hyderabad. I'd like to London anyway. So what has happened is your competition has gone way ahead of you. You could have asked that question 20 years ago, and Ranchi would have come up. But why did it sucks? I mean, there are no bars. It's like Hyderabad is great. I mean, at least Kachibauli is great. I can do Vastu and I can live in a modern house in Arizona. I can drive on Duhara. I can go to the airport. It's great. Fly to London every day. Fly to Frankfurt. Fly to Hong Kong. Even now, they're doing fashion in India. No? Low cost flights to Hanoi. Because Vietnam sasta ho gaya was. I keep reading about this. So Sri Lanka to flights. तो राशि ने कहा ये सब तक इंडिया जाता है
पटना से भी जाती है बैंकॉक पे
अरे वो हमारा उसका वजह वो बैंकॉक काहे जाते पटना से आने वाले तो but then come back to your question first. I was flattered in making so closely, and you said at the end it's a political economy question. You are right. I have researched this and I will tell you what I found. It's very depressing. I don't have an answer. It's very depressing. So I went to Tirupur, I went to Vapi, where the shirts, 3,000 rupee shirts. And I asked those people, I speak some Gujarati also. I said, why are you not setting up 200 rupee, 300 rupee factories? Dhanda hai ko nahi kar rahe ho? They said, our wage rates are very high. I said, I know that. So why don't you go to UP and Bihar and Jharkhand and set up these factories? No, they don't have skills. I said, don't touch shit. 25% of your shop floor are Biharis and Bongs and Jharkhandis and, they have all the skills. I'm not saying you go there, you want to get, whatever you do in Coimbatore, I don't know. You want to get kind of food and all that, and you can't deal with the ecosystem. And Bihar, काफी तुम मिर्जापुर देखे होता South Indian are watching this Mirzapur, get very scared. ये कैसे लोग? और that Jamdara, हाँ वो बड़ा डर लगता है यार. We have a nice we have a nice civilized sort of existence there. So I said, okay, set them. They will set up the thing, then you make money out of them. The answer I got, Gujaratis are more blunt on this. Tamilians are fascinating. They said, I know them, they do that. The Gujaratis told me, essentially, I'll tell you what they told me in Gujarati, I translated it. They said, Unka swabhav kharab hai. I said, kya matlab? They said, Unka swabhav kharab hai. Their character is bad. I said, but they're coming to Surat, and working on your shop. I said, exactly. They come and work here. We control them, but you see, we don't use their families. We don't like that. So, we are very content to destroy the Indian railways by moving a bunch of people like cattle, thousands of kilometers every day, to answer your shirts question. But, so if I'm an economist, I'm defeated. The wages there are 1/3 of Tirupur and Babi. Those shirts cannot be made with victories for Babi, except I have the skills to make those shirts. But I can't make them. Now, here the government could do a lot. But also you need society to do a lot. Both have to happen. So we try to do things in Patta, but as usual in India, it's always some 2000 batch IIT graduate who is somehow doing their age. So he comes and he's corrector for 2 years, he does something, and he goes, corrector saab ne bahut acha kiya, and the moment he's transferred, the whole thing goes. We have tried. And then I've always told my people from Jharkhand as doctors, कि हमने 3 यूनिट खोला. When I asked them, वो 3 यूनिट का क्या हुआ, I get a silence. Because this thing is completing fit to the ecosystem as we grow, right? And that is not happening. And I don't have an answer for why it's not happening. Just like, I think one of the most important questions we have to ask if we are going to make policy. And before we get technocratic is, I don't have an answer to it. I've offered young people who have a good research proposal, I get them a full score. Can't do it in India, get shot. In England, because you can't go to America anymore, to a PhD on this. Why did you pick industrialize? Why did you pick industrialize? I don't know. No one's written about it. Then to research. Once I get the answer to that, I'll be able to unlock this problem. And you're right. I mean, the bottom line is until you get prosperity, better education, better healthcare in the north and east of India, India is only going to be not like Pakistan and is never going to be something.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Apurva Sharma. Thank you for putting up such a dynamic debate. My first question, sir, is in last 20 years, the CAGR growth of global GDP has been 2.92%. And in last 5 years, it has been 2.25%. So we have shrunk when it comes to global GDP growth. So when you say 6% is good for India's GDP, what are you benchmarking this with? Are you saying global GDP or something else?
I'm benchmarking it with 3.5% GDP growth that I had to face for most of my life. So I'm not Pakistan.
And also the fact that, a lot of countries which did come out of poverty grew at 6% for a sustained period.
So you get up poverty. We are going to vulnerability or the problems that associate with poverty. You're still going to have hunger. You're still going to have vulnerability. You're still going to have disease. You're still going to have a massive unpaid at 6%. Not denying. And I'm happy about 6% because it's not 3.5. That's it.
It's just a number, basically.
No, 6% is better than 3.5. You could be Pakistan. You could be Burkina Faso. We were there once upon a time. I'm old enough to remember that. We were there once upon a time. We're not going to be there anymore. I'm saying this is the bottom. This is the bottom. We are going to be a middle-income trap country, not a low-income trap country. It is extremely unlikely we go to the IMF, have a balance of unless something these schools things are bad. We're going to go to the fund, we're going to have a massive payments crisis, we're going to have undue amounts of violence. Well, I don't know what knocks out anything. Those things are not going to happen to us with this level of growth. 6% is quite good in that sense. It keeps you healthy enough not to fall badly sick. It doesn't keep you healthy enough to be prosperous.
Sorry, just one more. Can you just let someone else ask questions? We have a really short time also.
So in terms of the talks we had today,
Yes. In respect of the talk we had, the chat both of you had today, and the writings that both of you do, would it be correct to say that 2.5 million people, Indians, leaving India every year for the past several years, are they the intelligent
folks as per the Darwin theory of evolution? Okay, this is like yesterday I attended an event and this fund manager I talked about, and he certainly had become an expert on international politics. So this is that kind of question, I mean, you expect me to answer a question of which is more anthropological and probably sociological in nature, whereas that is not really my area of expertise. But at a very simple level, I guess it's like when I talk to friends of mine who live in Dubai, or when I talk to people who live in Mumbai, they're in their heads the idea that you do not have to pay any income tax, or the fact that the value added tax, or what is GST in India, is just 5%. That is a huge thing. And if you think about it, if you make a certain amount of money, let's say there are two individuals, both of them make, let's say, 100 rupees, right? So in India, taxes and everything, that 100 would probably become, depending on 35, or it would become 65, or maybe even a 60. Whereas in Dubai, it would be more or less, if not 100, but let's say 95, right? So effectively, you're making almost 50% more, right? And Dubai is obviously more expensive, but even once you factor that in, and then once you invest that money, the compounding that happens is fabulous. So for, anyone who thinks about life like that, sadly I don't, it is a no-brainer. It's honestly a no-brainer, right? See, I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but a lot of rich people aren't really worried about democracy or the fact that they can vote every 5 years, right? उनको अपना फॉरेन हॉलिडे चाहिए, और मतलब अब तो यूरोप भी जाना, मतलब हर साल यूरोप जाना जरूरी है ना. Last year I did Turkey, next year I want to do New Zealand. So you can't do that when your 100 becomes 60, but when your 100 life comes to 95. Sorry, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question.
Let's just add on to what he said. So you have to distinguish people who went before 1,000 and people who went after. Before 2000, you had a choice to make. This is the culture piece. Okay, who the hell would want to live here before 2000? I mean, I couldn't buy a bottle of scotch in this city. I couldn't buy a Mercedes in this thing. So you go around and, so that was when, and this is happening from 1950. But to do a study of the 80s, 1950, army chiefs and all where they settled. The guy who did Operation Blue Star, he went to London and it. Somebody had said to Bangkok, somebody had said to Canada. Rana Gandhi murder hua tha na wo. वो कहाँ गया था? Canada गया. हो गया. So this has been happening for a long time with the super elites. But then it was a binary. So you could come back to India to visit. You couldn't attain even a reasonable standard of living. In my toilet, I couldn't even get a proper toilet. I mean, I get a okay toilet, but I couldn't get a good toilet. My toilet now, that hotel I'm living in, the same as I'm getting London, probably better. Then you had, after 91, that you have is slightly people like who are globally mobile, who have global jobs, and I can choose where I'm living. Right? And then to have the other kind of migration is because there is a British society. Here the film industry is everything. I've never seen a country where the film industry is everything. So just think about it. Just think if you're coming from Guntur, like these things, they're bright kids, they're fun, tobacco farmers, children. They come from Guntur, they have the opportunity in this country. So when they go to the US or here or anything else, it's a liberating experience, especially for them. So that is another motivation. And that is why people from Punjab and the rich things are so keen to go. Because they're able to access, I come from an upper middle class Indian family, I have my contacts here. So I come back, I press some buttons, I plug in. Then I plug out everything in, I have the contacts and I study there. That's a small minority, me, okay, fine. No. But the rest of them, for them, it continuously what it was for IDs then, a huge opportunity.
Right. Okay, thank you. It was great having Dr. Roy here and having all of you come listen to it on a long weekend, over a long weekend. I mean, I was told it's a long weekend, I had no idea. So I had no idea. And, very, very surprisingly, this is the first time when, I've been a part of such a discussion in Mumbai and no one has asked a question on the stock market. So, our events still do anything. So, thank you. And I mean, I even tried to sort of tell you guys my first question was क्या लगता है, but उसके बाद भी no one bothered to ask. So thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Rathin. Round of applause for that 1.5 hours.